Hey everybody, welcome to Local Business Hacks Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Case, and I'm on a mission to help you. Every week, we're going to be talking to local business owners and experts to get their best tips, tricks, and hacks to grow your business. This show is designed to teach you, inspire you, and motivate you to take massive action and start to build your future-proof business. Whether you're just starting off or you're taking your existing business to the next level, this episode is for you. So let's get started. Hey, local business hackers. I'm your host, Director of Global Business Development for Referrizer, joined today by, I don't even know what to categorize you, the energy health man himself, Scott Ohlgren, the CEO of E3Live. Scott, welcome to Local Business Hacks.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So I know you've had an incredible journey throughout the health and wellness space over the last umpteen years. Talk to us a little bit about that journey and what ultimately brought you to the CEO of E3Live.
Wow. Well, at 67 years old, when I look back at that journey, which probably started off from dropping out of the university at the age of 18 and a half, 19, after just one semester, and realizing that the standard education path and employment path was just made no sense to me at all. And I had come from a very small town which, man, if you didn't go to college, what were you going to do? Work at the factory? So it was really scary and weird for me. But when I look back at that moment and make that decision, and then being in this chair leading this company, I would really say that the answer how I got here was really a series of inquiries, maybe 15, 20 major inquiries along the way, where I would meet someone who would tell me something fascinating about what they were doing for work, and then following that new idea and that new desire to learn how did they do what they were doing it, and really learning how to not be afraid to go do something that was unusual or out of the ordinary, and not be afraid to make unusual choices. And I actually got into the natural health, the natural wellness, the natural diet, the whole diet, disease, diet, health connection initially during a 3-year hitchhiking trip around the world. That was really how I got started. I had dropped out of college thinking this makes no sense. And before I dropped out, I met someone that'd say, hey, why don't you come up to Colorado and work at the ski areas? And I was a skier. I was from Wisconsin. So I thought that's good. I got a way in. I had no idea how to get a job at a skier. What do? You just show up. He was great. It's like, he said, no, just follow me and I'll show you how to do it. And so I went out there and ended up living next to a guy who was about 10 years older than me, and he was building his cabin. This is way, way up in the mountains, like 10,000 feet, way, way up there, a ski area there. And he was about 10 years older than me, and he had dropped out of college. And he had actually just gotten back from a 2-year hitchhiking trip around the world, like vagabonding, And his stories were I had never been so captivated by another human being in my life. And it was one of those moments where every chance I could get, we ended up working at the same ski area that winter. And it was a night ski area. This was back when they used to have night skiing. And we'd be fitting all the, people coming in. And when they'd leave, I would turn to this guy and say, okay, what did you do after Madagascar? So when those guys came up and they were going to rip you off, how did you do that? And then where'd you go there? And how did you get your passport? And I would ask him all these questions. And he had such a fascinating life. And I thought, that's the kind of life I want. I don't know how to do it, but that's what I want. And the other thing too, he had all these books on vagabonding and traveling and how to get out there in the world and really live, by the seat of your pants and, design a life they wanted to. And I immersed myself in that. And at the end of that, like 2 years there, I got a chance to go up into Wyoming, and someone said, man, there's this boom happening up there. You should go learn to be a carpenter or something. So I did. And I followed this other guy who ended up leaving, but I got a job with a group. I had never picked up a saw in my life, but 6 months later, I was running a crew up there. We were remodeling these houses in these tiny little towns up in Wyoming. And that was it. I thought, okay, this is where I'm going to make my money. I'm going to get my nest egg. So I bought this old beat up house, and for 18 months, I fixed it up and sold it and made about like $15,000, which in today, this is in 1979. So in today's money, that's like $55,000. I'd never had that much. I was broke. I'd been broke my whole life. All of a sudden I had this pile of money. And the whole time I'd been studying about like, how do you travel around the world? How do you do what, this guy did? I was reading all those books and I left and I took off for what ended up being a 3-year trip all the way around the world. It was crazy. Absolutely. One of those things that, it's life changing. Spent 6 weeks in Turkey. And when I went, I wouldn't go to the cities. You'd land in the cities, but you immediately get out there into the countryside where you end up sleeping in ditches and stuff. I mean, I knew how to do it from all those books and that guy. I'd read books on how to meet people and how to get into situations where strangers suddenly become people that are inviting you for lunch and stuff. I mean, I worked on a kibbutz in Israel. I spent a year traveling down through Africa. I was just growing like crazy in terms of people skills and life skills and adventure. And it was really amazing. And I ended up 92 days on a 41-foot sloop in the Indian Ocean. I mean, we hit force 9 storms. We ended up in the newspaper back in Durban, South Africa, because of the thing we went through. I was over in Australia. Anyways, one of the things that occurred during that trip was that I kept bumping into, and I don't know if that's fate or if this is how that works, but I kept bumping into these people, these young people, also travelers, but also people who lived in different places who were really into this natural wellness lifestyle. And I'd never been introduced to that, but it was immediately very interesting to me that whole idea that the biggest missing link, between health and disease was one's food choices, what you are actually putting into your mouth on a daily basis, oftentimes 2 or 3 or 4 times a day, year after year after year, was the missing link between a healthy state, when you're just like humming on all 12 cylinders, and a state where you are starting to fall apart. And it was that link there. And I became fascinated by it. So, I was learning from all those guys and reading all those books and stuff. And so anyways, when I got to say too, when I say this now, that this was like a revolutionary thing when I was traveling, and first heard about it in 1980, 81, 82 is when I was traveling. I'm sure people today go, well, duh. Everyone knows you got to eat well and that's how you stay healthy. But I am telling you, back then, it was like, ChatGPT is for us today. That is revolutionary. There's no one on the planet that doesn't go, is this mind-blowing or what? How do you even if you start to use it, you go, I haven't tapped into a 1/10, that's the way it was like. And that's what that was like back then. You have to realize that there was hardly any connection around that time to that. At least where I came from, there was no. If you had a problem, you took a drug. So anyway, so I got back, and so one of the first things I did was I started researching, how am I going to get into this? And so I ended up enrolling in this 9-month disease diet health program in Boston. And it was great. It taught me the foundations of what I wanted to do. I didn't know, was I going to be a counselor? Did I want to be a cook? Do I want to teach this? I don't know. But one of my teachers was kind of an innovative guy. And his whole thing was, there are superfoods in the world. You lay out all 4,000 plants in the world, and some of them are going to be these extraordinary, as if a magnifying glass was placed on them, and they have a super high amount of nutrient denseness in them, and that to find those foods would be a very, very good thing. And one of the ones that he was researching was this very particular algae that happened to grow in only one particular mountain lake in Southern Oregon. And from that whole experience of hearing that guy and going to the school and everything, I was just going through this true cellular regeneration experience. I was seeing in my body over exactly what all the books were talking about. So out of that whole experience, I left there and I got a job working for a supplement manufacturing company. And anyways, I ended up writing a couple of books on my experience, because I thought the world needs to know about this, how you can take a diseased state, an unwell state, and turn it into so that everything is humming. And the key is to change your nutritional intake into what you could call a cleaner, a lighter, and easier to digest, a nutrient dense, and to remove all the foods that acted really like sludge. And that's really what most fast foods are. They're like putting in the wrong oil into a truck. At first you can do it, and then for a while you can do it, and it's fun to do it. And every once in a while you can still do it. But day after day, after month, after year, nothing can function at its optimum level. So that's what the books were about. And that's what I ended up doing. And that led me to creating my own company where I created, really at the time, it was the first non-caffeinated nootropic drink. No one had ever done that before. And we were selling in every Whole Foods and 1,400 other independent stores. We were selling in Europe and Russia. I was traveling to the Ukraine. I mean, I was over there giving talks on the plants that were in there. It was really amazing. So anyways, that's kind of eventually how I ended up here, working here.
What a story. Holy moly. What are these books that you've written, and how can we get our hands on them?
Oh, man. Well, I wrote them in the early 2000s, and it's pretty tough to make a living writing books, but there's still 72,000 copies out there. They're all on the concept of internal cleansing and cellular cleansing. There's one my first book was called Cellular Cleansing Made Easy. And the second one is a 28-day nutritional cleansing program. And if people look up my name, I got a very unusual last name, Ohlgren, they'll find those books. I won't get paid for them because they're going to be all used books, but they're there. You can find them on Amazon. You'll find them. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, congrats to E3Live for getting you on the team, because it seems like you got a wealth of knowledge over the years, which is incredible.
Thank you.
Scott, I'd love to speak more on E3Live. How can people get involved with the product, take advantage of it? What's the best way?
Yeah, E3Live is a fascinating and very innovative company. Talk about looking beyond the standard career path. Wow. And being curious, about things. For the last 30 years, the two owners, Tamara and Michael, have been one of the very few harvesters of this unique aqua botanical algae, which is a true superfood among superfoods that grows wild. I'm pointing because I'm actually in Klamath Falls right now. Klamath Falls is at like maybe 4,100, 4,200 feet above elevation. And it's in a very, not isolated, but there's not many people here. When we moved here, I was surprised. There's not, it's a small town, but the lake is extraordinarily big. But it's been kept so clean because there's not any industry around it. So they're located here. And these people were among the first group of pioneers who started to look and see and study this particular, I call it a plant, but in fact, it's actually classified as a blue-green algae. And it's called Aphanizomenum floss aqua. That's its whole Latin name.
One more time.
Aphanizomenon floss aqua. And they call it AFA for short, AFA.
You
and out of
cursing at me?
Say again?
Are you cursing at me? No, I'm just.
Yes. Yeah, there's a wide guess as to how many algae there are out there in the world, between 30,000 and 700,000. It's just a huge amount. But this is a very, very particular species. And there's actually, they believe that there could be multiple forms of Aphanizomenum floss aqua, because the ones that they're finding in other lakes have they have toxicity problems, they have all sorts of different things. So, there's a lot of classification still going on. But anyways, this particular one grows very, very well and abundantly during its growing season, during July and August of every year. And that's where these pioneers, these first harvesters that started doing this at this lake, started to figure out, how do you harvest it? How do you pull it out? How do you separate it from everything else that's in the lake? How do you do those things? So there was a lot of technology and everything that was required. And it's amazing. Since then, it started this whole revolution that is still going on today, all from this single cell little plant. There are hundreds and hundreds and thousands of scientific studies have been going on still to this day. Europe, I was just reading ones yesterday in Italy about afanosum floss aqua, the effect that it can have on human beings. So that's it. And we really specialize in, we're the only ones that have figured out how to pull that algae out. You can freeze dry it, you can put it into capsules. It's very, very effective that way. But we happen to also specialize in harvesting AFA while it's still fresh and then freezing it and then shipping it all over the country and the world, where it arrives in a couple of days, where it's still cold at your door. You put it in your refrigerator, you put it in your freezer. So it's still enzymatically active and alive. And again, we also still have encapsulated versions of AFA as well.
And you guys pair it with one of my favorite superfoods, Camu Camu, and there's also ones for canines. So people hop on E3Live.com to check out the products and start feeling and helping your body.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for suggesting people give it a shot. I've been eating it every day since 1980, December of 1987, when I first got introduced to it. And I've eaten it virtually every day, all these decades. Yeah. I'm 67 years old. And I mean, I'm just one of the healthiest people I know. It really is a powerful, powerful adjunct to whatever it is that you're putting into your body.
That's awesome. And for those of you listening and not watching Scott, I can testify that he's a very healthy looking 67-year-old male. That's awesome. Scott, let's transition a little bit into our podcast, Local Business Hacks. So I welcome you to share some of your stories that ultimately brought you to being a CEO of a powerhouse company like E3Live.
Well, there's so many, as you can imagine. At the age of 6, 7, you kind of collect a bunch. But I want to go back to kind of what I was figuring out was the start of the whole thing. And that is, it's a hack that I see missing in a shocking number of human beings and in business leaders. And it's this ability to actually learn how to be and how to practice curiosity. I'll be honest, I'm often appalled at people's inability to have a true conversation with other human beings. I mean, this is at parties, it's at gatherings, it's while you're in, an elevator, it's when you meet someone at the store. Most people only know how to talk incessantly about themselves and their story. And it's like they've never learned to read a room, because when those people are in that, it's almost like a trance they get into. If they would just look around and see the impact, the level of sheer boredom that is occurring in that room caused by that person just going on and on about themselves or about something that their family did or something. It blows my mind. So really, it's one of the most powerful hacks you can learn is to read a room and learn how and practice, actually go out and go, I'm going to practice being curious today, and I'm going to learn how that works. What is the art of being curious? And one of the most interesting things you will learn is that it makes your day more interesting because you're asking other people interesting questions. And people, if you are open and you are in a physical and space of curiosity, people will open up. And I want to actually give you a cool example that just happened yesterday. My weeks since I've been here have been the busiest of my life. And for the first time ever, I can't keep track of the amount of emails that come in. I watch them, but I'm so busy. I just go, that's really important, but I got to work on this. But I saw an email come in yesterday from Yvonne, the head of our concierge department. And she said, you guys need to read this. And it was the thread of a inquiry from Finland contacting E3Live, our concierge department. And they were saying, I've been hearing about E3Live over here in the Nordic world, and how can I get some? So he was responding in the normal way. But then he said, and think about what this is. He was curious. He had the state of curiosity. He said, hey, I'm just curious. how did you learn about our product? Tell me a little bit about you. And the person wrote back, this extraordinary. I mean, I don't even know how. It's like Chat GPT. I don't even know how we can utilize this or what to do with this information. But he said, if you didn't know, everyone in the Nordic world is familiar with E3Live. And it's because we are familiar with a very famous businessman. I don't really know yet what he has to do with Finland, but his name is Carlos Ghosn. Carlos Ghosn, yeah. Do you know him?
I don't.
You will. When you see his photo, you'll go, oh, yeah, I've heard that story. He ran Mitsubishi. He might still run it. He's wealthy. He's a billionaire. But he actually has a documentary about him. Carlos Ghosn, Ghosn is his last name. And as soon as you look up, you'll recognize his face. I think he's originally from Lebanon. But anyways, he works in the international world. And on a couple of documentaries about his life show his desire and his passion around longevity. And his nutritionist showed that every morning, the first thing he takes in the morning is E3Live Brain On. It is our concentrated form of algae. It's the intracellular part that has a more cognitive focus, increase in the feel-good chemicals that produce, that your brain needs to feel good and feel focused. He uses that, a ton of it every day. I didn't know that. None of our staff knew that. And here was this guy or this person from Finland revealing this extraordinarily powerful, potent piece of information that never would have happened had our concierge team, which, by the way, I didn't have anything to do with training this concierge team. And as I watch the staff that do this, that's one of the qualities that have been embedded into our culture is be curious about human beings. Not only because it's a good thing to do to be for another human being, it's look at the results that you get. I don't even know, like when we get off this podcast, Carl, I'm going to be like, all right, what are we going to do with that knowledge that one of the most famous billionaires on the planet, who's also into longevity, who also understands the diet disease, diet health connection, who also grasps the concept of superfoods, he happens to be using our superfood out of all the superfoods that he could do.
Awesome.
So,
awesome.
The hack, learn to be curious people and stop talking incessantly about yourself. I have a feeling most people do it is because they're nervous, or it's habit, or they see other people doing it. Don't. Be curious.
Be curious.
It's the best hack in the world. It got me everything where I've done.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for that, Scott. I got a good one for you.
Yeah.
If you were to have dinner with any historical figure from the past or present, who would it be and why?
Well, I suppose Einstein would be kind of interesting. I don't know. I've never heard any talks by him, so maybe he would just be either really boring or so over my head. But he'd be an interesting one. And I think what I'd want to ask him, or just like, I'd want to ask him the really philosophical question, almost the spiritual side of like, how does anyone, I've always thought this to anyone who studies physics or quantum physics or the universe, even some of the ones that are famous now on television and stuff, I just go, how do you not get overwhelmed by the immensity of things? And just that whole idea that really, out of the tiny little dot that was smaller than anything we've ever seen comes every planet and every, how does this work and where and why and who created it? And, aside from the religious response of like, well, God, Garrett, I mean, what happened before that and before the Big Bang, and why are we here? What's the whole impulse behind it? And did we sign up for this? Each of us human beings, did we go, I want to be there? Why? And how did I get differentiated from the original source? And all of that. That to me would be fascinating.
That's awesome. What a great answer. I've gotten Elon Musk a bunch this week, so I was happy to hear Einstein. Scott, I can imagine at 67 and looking as healthy as you are and seem, You have quite the intense morning routine. I'd love to know how that's evolved over the years and what it currently looks like.
Oh, interesting. Actually, in my first book, I talked about what I called the sauna rounds because I had early on in my life, and it was really from living in Wyoming and Colorado, was I got turned on to hot springs, natural hot springs. And this was back when there were no books on it or anything. So you had to find the scratches of paper. It said you go down this, and that. And all of them were, of course, clothing optional. I was totally into that, going out in nature with not a thing on, hopping into water that came out of the ground, heated for you. Even as a young, 19-year-old having just dropped out, I just remember thinking nothing makes me feel better. I didn't understand the chemistry behind it like they do now. And, Wim Hof had not been around, but in 2000, when I wrote my first book, I wrote about that. I called it one of the 7 tricks to longevity is you do these sauna rounds. You get into a sauna and you really work yourself out. And then you have a cold plunge outside and you do that. And you do that just 2 or 3 times. And I talked about how I contend no one ever goes into a cold plunge without some trepidation. I've been doing cold plunges now for 40 years, something like that. When we moved here, you're not going to believe this. When we moved here, we're unloading the truck. As we're unloading the truck and getting everything done, and a lot of our staff came up to help us and get us all set up. Hey, new CEO, this is great. That afternoon, I was already finding out, where do I get my cold plunge? And the cold plunge that I've found is the easiest to get. There's all sorts of complex ways of doing it. No, you go out and get a Rubbermaid horse trough. Rubbermaid horse trough. $160. And you get the medium-sized one. I think it's called the 55-gallon one. And I'll send you a picture. In fact, Carl, when we get off, I'm going to send you a photo. That was the first thing I went downtown, like the next day or two. I found there was a, supply ranch or supply place. And sure enough, I said, you guys got the 55? And he said, let me go check and check. They had one left. Great. And they're lightweight. That's the other cool thing. They're Rubbermaid, so they can squeeze. They'll handle the freezing and everything. And I found a place on the house that we rented. And it was actually in kind of an exposed spot, but I thought, okay, I'm going to be doing it mainly in the morning, and I had to drag a hose around and there was snow on the ground. I had to get the ice out of the hose and everything, but I filled up that cold plunge. So anyways, to answer your question, one of the first things I do, and I will say, like I say, I've been doing this all these years. When I get up in the morning, there's like a moment where I go, cold plunge. So I will say, even though I've tried it, like Wim Hof says, do it just when you're getting up. I don't have a sauna here. Boo. But what I do is I do take a warm shower first to kind of get loosened up. And then I'm excited about getting into the cold plunge. I can't do it without being warmed up first. So for those of you who want to try it, try the sauna round. Get into a sauna or a hot tub or something, or a hot shower, and then get into a cold plunge. And if you don't have that, of course, you learn to do the cold shower and then hot. Cold shower and then hot. And you start slow. It's like working out in the gym. You don't go there for 2 hours. You just get some straps, lightweight straps, and do that for 30 reps. And so to do things, and that has been a transformative thing in me. There's nothing that will put you into the zone faster than a hot cold alternative. Your mind is like focused. So that's it. I love chai tea. There's a company I just discovered. I don't like the bags, not weak. It's not strong enough. I don't want to wait 5 minutes. So there's a powder. It's called, actually, my wife, Roxanne, said, look at this. They're from Portland. So it comes in a little container, and they actually sell it at Fred Meyer's, which I couldn't believe. I was getting it online. And then, wow, Fred Meyer's. So you get the powder. It doesn't have any sweetener. It doesn't have any milk in it. And then you put it in there. And I love those spices in the morning. It's got a little bit of caffeine. And then I heat it up and put some of my favorite sweetener in it. So that's kind of it. I do like the fancy name that they call it now is intermittent fasting. Basically, that's, it says, hey, make sure your stomach is empty at least every day. And I mean empty. There's nothing in there, because then it's eating itself, and then it's resetting itself. So I will generally not eat anything from, let's say we had dinner at 6, and I will hopefully not eat until 10 or 11 this morning. And I keep myself hydrated. Hydration is another. You saw me pick up. Look at this. You can't even see it. Yeah. This, I'm big into hydration. And that's kind of it, stay fit. I love the rubber bands that allow you to kind of do a workout anywhere. Yeah, that's my routine.
It's amazing what a cold plunge does for you mentally and physically. If you can get in that cold water, you can do anything that day. There's no way.
Yeah, that's the other thing, isn't it? It's like, this is be the hardest thing I will do.
The hardest and definitely the coldest, that's for sure.
Yeah. Again, though, for listeners, warm up. Okay. Get used to it. Warm up. And then you're going to count 15 seconds to start, and then, you do 15 seconds a couple of times and then go, I'm going to go for a half minute today. And you have to scream and you have to move and you have to, but it's cool because it will get you to the place where part of your brain goes, why are you screaming? What are you doing?
Yeah.
This is called sensation. You think it's killing you? Yeah. Yeah. And so it becomes a real internal game. It's like, slow down, dude. It's not that weird. And all of a sudden,
at that point,
yeah, you get into that. All right. What happens if I just got really centered? Man, it's so cool.
That's awesome. Scott, thank you for being you and sharing with me. And we're beyond excited to follow you. Everybody go to E3Live.com. I just ordered a bunch of Brain On and some subs so that I can feel my best and hopefully look and feel like Scott when I'm 67. That's for sure.
Carl, have you already placed your order? Awesome, man.
I appreciate it. I'm ordering it for the dog too. I'm pretty excited.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, awesome.
Scott, thank you so much from myself and all of our listeners all over the globe. Everybody go be sure to check out Scott Ohlgren on LinkedIn and E3Live.com. Scott, we're beyond excited and thankful for you coming on and sharing your story.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you so much. That's it for this week's episode. I hope you found it helpful. Be sure to head over to our site, local-business-hacks.com, to check out the show notes and send me questions or ideas for future episodes. If you want to grow your business, just like the people you've heard from here, follow Local Business Hacks Podcast and tune in for new tips, tricks, and tactics. Until next time, thanks for listening and keep hacking.